Short press conference. Say it every time. Anybody? Okay. Thank you.
It looks like you're going to get Avonte Maddox back this week. Is he a safety this week or a corner?
Yeah, we'll cross all those bridges when we get there. We got to be prepared to get guys back, and we also have to be prepared if they don't make it back.
The run defense has been a big point of emphasis. Obviously, you had the 90-yard run, not much otherwise. But your overall assessment of how the run defense did
6-6.
in that game.
A win. And I mean, yeah, I mean, you know me. I mean, yeah, it was 28-13. That's where our run defense was. Every game, our only objective is to win. Now, we particularly in that game, we knew with backup quarterback in the game, and then with the third string quarterback, that the run game was going to be a key part of getting to 28-13, or just getting to that W, however you do it. So there were some good things. Obviously, that 90-yarder wasn't a good thing. When you give up a long run, it's very rarely one person's mistake. You can give up a long pass and it just be one guy. Everybody can do something right. One guy trips and falls down, or one guy miscommunicates, and you can look really bad on a pass by one guy. It's hard to look really bad on a run unless you get mistakes at all three levels, and we did on that play. Mistake on the D-line, mistake at a linebacker, and then missed tackle on the back end, and that's where you end up. But I was proud of the guys, the way that they rallied behind that. They didn't let one bad play become another, and so I've been in that position before. I think it was 2013. I was in Detroit. We opened the season with Minnesota with Adrian Peterson. He was just coming off leading the NFL in rushing, and our whole game plan was getting him stopped. Very first play of the season was an 80-yard touchdown. And it was the same thing. Make one guy gets out of his gap, makes another guy miss, and then runs past everybody else. And I think that game also, he had 80 on one play, and then we held him to you'd have to look it up, but we held him to 95 or something like that. It was similar. But I was proud of the guys, the way they bounced back from that, because I think that limiting the run game, not just with him, but with Chris Thompson, who I have a lot of respect for as a back, I think that obviously was where we were in that game and got us to where we were in that game.
What's it like on the sideline after a play like that? Do you have to consciously guard against a play like that, kind of turning the tide?
No, I think our guys kept their confidence. I mean, it's one thing when you don't know what the problem is. That was an easy one. I mean, it's like, okay, that. All right, well, don't do that, and don't do that, and we're good. I mean, sometimes that's easier said than done. But I think that, when you're talking about sideline and you're talking about the confidence of a team and stuff like that, it's a lot easier for those guys to put mistakes behind them when they know what they were. And that there was some physical nature to those mistakes, but it was also some execution stuff, and those are a little bit easier to put behind you.
Jim, this is the third straight week you'll face an elite back. How does Elliott differ from Barkley and Peterson?
Yeah, they're all really good in their own rights. Elliott is just so strong. He's hard to tackle one-on-one. He has enough speed that he can get to the edge and he can create big plays, but he's so strong. They're not very complicated in the run game. They don't need to be. Just sort of hand him the ball, and even if there's an extra guy, he can run through him or make him miss. He's also really increased his load as his career's gone on in the passing game also. He's a dangerous screen runner. You have to account for him. He's obviously one of the best backs in the league, and if we're going to come out with a win, we're going to have to get him stopped.
What's the last 2 weeks?
Yeah, understatement.
Excuse me?
Understatement.
Without getting, obviously you're not going to give us your game plan for Sunday, but what goes into your thinking of game planning in terms of how much you are going to use it and how much you aren't?
I mean, it depends on offense. It depends on, we had some blitz called in that game, and there was protections that, sort of got us out of them, or the quarterback took a timeout on a couple of them. I think we might have blitzed like 3 times in the last 2 weeks, one of which was a 90-yard touchdown run, and another one was like a 50-yard pass. So, you try to manage the game, and you try to sort of find a formula for what you're best at that week. And honestly, that's sort of been a challenge for us sort of these last half a dozen games or so because particularly in the back end, we've had a different cast almost every single week. And as soon as you start getting a feel as a play caller, okay, this is what we can execute and this is what's good for our matchups, you have another injury and the next week it's a little bit different. And you sort of start over again trying to find that. But that's sort of where we are right now. I think the other part that goes into that is our D-line has done a good job of pressuring, and they've done a good job of getting pressure without blitzing. And when you can do that, it really doesn't make a lot of sense to subject your secondary to more, more one-on-ones and a heavier load when, than when those guys could. One of the games we blitzed the most in was Jacksonville. And one of the reasons we blitzed a lot was the field was bad and we really couldn't generate our four-man pass rush the way that we normally do. Each game's different. Every opponent's different. And then obviously for us this year, the guys we're playing with have been different. So we just got to find a formula each week. What we did last week might not be what we do this week.
Confidence of the team on a particular play and bouncing back with Adrian. With a player, and I say this about Rasul on the throwback, and he made that great play when it looked like Chris Thompson had a ton of space. How can that affect an individual player's confidence?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it does go both ways. The more plays you make, the more confidence you have, and probably the freer you play when you're on the field. That was a big play for us. I don't know that it would have gone the distance. I mean, you look at the play, we have guys that, when he threw it back, they're coming, but it was probably going to be a pretty good chunk of a gain right there. Russell did his job on that play. He was the last line of defense and was able to get, again, a tough back, and he also had to defeat Trent Williams, who's obviously one of the best blockers. That was a huge play for us. At a critical point of that game, they're able to keep that drive alive and score. All of a sudden, it's a one-score game. So obviously, that was a big play, and he can build off of that.
Yeah, what stands out to you about the way the Cowboys have played offensively the last 3 or 4 games?
They've sort of they're not a one-trick pony. They're getting good production out of their quarterback. The quarterback has taken a proactive stance when it comes to scrambling for first downs. Thanksgiving game, the New Orleans game. I mean, there were a couple plays that he made critical first downs when it didn't look like he had anything. We've already talked about Ezekiel Elliott. I think that I think at 19 certainly added to their passing game. So it's one of those teams. You put too much emphasis on Ezekiel Elliott, all of a sudden Cooper's making a lot of plays down the field, or Beasley's making a lot of plays on the third down game. If you don't account for the quarterback, he has the ability to move, and even if you get everybody else covered. So I think that's probably been the biggest thing that's come out of the last couple of weeks. They've been playing at an efficient level.
When you do look back at the film and your last game with the Cowboys just a few weeks ago, what's the biggest thing that you can pull from that?
Every game's a little bit different. There's always going to be plays you can play better and schemes that you can scheme a little bit better. The biggest part of that game is we just weren't happy with the way we finished the game. I think we had given up like 13 points into the fourth quarter and then gave up 2 touchdowns at the end. That's never where you want to be, and that's one thing that we're going to come out of this game. It's got to be a little bit more like the last couple weeks for us. There's going to be some plays that opponents are going to make. That's life in the NFL. But the teams that win, the teams that are successful, are those teams that are making those plays at the end of the game. And when we have, we've won. When we haven't, some of those games like Dallas, or go back to Carolina, and some of those, when we haven't made those plays, we haven't won. So it can't just be early in the game. We have to be able to come up with those plays in the fourth quarter. And, when we do, like the Rasul play, all of a sudden it puts us in a position to win.
In a situation like on Monday when there's an injury in Jernigan's case after the 46 is set, what changes from your perspective?
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I mean, you're just playing a player light, and it's something also that you didn't plan for. Really no different than getting a player hurt on the first play of the game. I mean, that happens a bunch of times. I mean, there are players that you lose in pregame. The Giants lost Ingram in pregame. You just, you got to plug next guy in, and then you also have to look, different packages, how you're going to play and stuff like that. Timmy's an important part. I think getting him back a couple weeks ago gave us a big boost. We were looking forward to more of that. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to go in this last game.
You mentioned Dak's ability to run. He's been doing it more. At times this year, you guys have given up chunks to quarterbacks on the ground. What's the key to stopping that?
Yeah, again, there's a lot of different levels. First of all, quarterbacks generally aren't running very much if you're doing a poor job of covering. So, it sounds a little bit funny to say that, but, sometimes, I mean, if they got guys wide open all the way, the quarterback isn't bothering to scramble. So, when you do get guys covered, then you need to be good in different levels, good eyes on the quarterback, good distribution in your pass rush, and then be able to close ground and be able to get guys on the ground. So there's a lot of different layers to it.
How have you been able to adjust at linebacker? You got Jordan out the last couple of games. You got two other guys playing with casts on their thumbs and stuff like that.
Awesome.
I guess Nathan obviously had the big interceptions, but has that changed? Like how you view the position?
Yeah, when we put guys on the field, we feel like they can do their job, and obviously they're a little bit hindered, but. That's the way it is in the NFL. They have enough for use of their hand that they can wrap up and they can tackle. We wouldn't be comfortable putting a guy out there that we didn't think could do their job. And all those guys we put out there, we think they can do their job. Nate Gary has, stepped in, played more Mike linebacker for us. He's a good communicator, made a big play when it counted in this game. So that's what this is all about. Last year we were able to overcome when we lost Jordan for a little bit, and the challenge doesn't change just because it's a different year.
That's kind of what I was going to ask. Is there anything you do differently if you have two linebackers with one hand? Do you think about anything? Would it take you out of anything you would normally do?
Yeah, no. I mean, I think that, like I said, I wouldn't even classify those guys as one hand. I mean, I don't know if you guys saw when we were in London. Camus came out after he had got his thumb injured, and he had like a giant, club on his hand. And even though the situation, because they were just playing all three wide receiver personnel, we had made the decision to go with Leroy in that spot for the second half because we just didn't feel like Camus could go in there and execute what we needed to be able to execute. The next week he had sort of the half cast and was able to go. So again, some things are a little bit different. If you remember, we played these guys last time. Camus had a chance to get an interception, and probably without that cast, I mean, Camus is a great athlete and has great hands. That might be a pick six, and that might change that game. So. It's not ideal, but again, if a guy can't do his job, we're not comfortable putting him on the field, and we felt comfortable putting those guys on the field. Pardon?
Why did you guys tackle better on Monday night?
I don't know. I really don't know that we did. I think that we played better team defense, and when you played better team defense, you look like better tacklers. I think that had a lot to do with it. 90-yard play, notwithstanding or withstanding, because we didn't play good team defense on that play. But I said a long time, there's an individual component to tackling, and there's a team component, knowing the other guys, knowing where everybody else is going to be, knowing when you can take a shot, when you can't. And there's a lot of times where somebody might miss a tackle that you don't even notice because the next guy's there half a second later, and and makes the play right there. So I think there was probably a little bit of that that went into it. I think our corners did tackle better than they have been. I think we still have there's still some improvement we can make there also.
You mentioned distribution in the pass rush. Do you have to put more emphasis on that in weeks where there is a mobile quarterback? Does that affect stunts and things of that nature?
Yeah, I mean, there's some times where you can get a little bit I guess more aggressive in your ability, and some quarterbacks that aren't as much of a threat to run. I mean, we've seen some of those. There's other ones that are threats to run, but there's also a fine line between that and not rushing at all. And, you know, we can keep just about any quarterback we want in the pocket, but the question or the price would be, all those guys sort of like being cautious and keeping them from running at the expense of being able to get pressure. So there's a fine line between those two things, and we want to push it as close to that edge as we can without making ourselves susceptible to quarterbacks that move the sticks. Really, the biggest things with scrambles are scrambles that that translate to a first down. You know, I mean, if they're scrambling and not moving the sticks, it's really not moving the needle as far as the game goes. But if they're able to move the sticks, like Prescott has done in a couple key situations over the last few weeks, that you know, that's where you know, it can affect the defense. All right, guys.
Thanks.